Are we working? It looks like we're working. All right, cool. Cool. All right, guys. Thank you for joining me this evening or in the future whenever you tune into this. It's Sunday, February 9th, and we could be getting a ton of rain at any point. If it happens, hopefully the background noise filtration on StreamYard will take care of that because it gets loud in a metal roof building. Tonight we are you get to be my test run for a presentation that I'm doing in a few days because I realized I should probably run through all my notes and my outline in real time to make sure one that I stay within my allotted time and that I cover and convey the information that I want. So we're going to be talking all about these early lessons learned with sheep, particularly from a pasture management standpoint, at a level that I hope is going to be very friendly to people who are just getting into it or want to get into grazing small ruminants, especially hair sheep. So that's what I'm going to be covering. I think I'm going to launch right into that in a minute. I don't have a whole lot of farm news to catch you guys up on. Everything's just kind of been maintaining. We're at 14 lambs. Everybody's doing good. We've been very mild. We're fixing to have a ton of rain, like a literal ton of rain, 4, 5, 6 inches. They're telling us over the next few days. So that'll be fun. At least it's not, snow and ice, but yeah, that's going to be a mess. Yeah, we're in good order. Yeah, I do have one quick announcement though. We've got actually two. So we've got our planned, quarterly homestead gathering open house up here. That's March 2nd, Sunday, March 2nd. And the day before, I don't have this officially out on the mailing list yet, but it's going to come out probably tomorrow. Next week or next, let me back that up a minute. March 1st, Saturday, March 1st, we're having an agroforestry workshop up here. And Wynn Miller, who is pretty much the lady in our area that has figured this stuff out, has figured out how to implement agroforestry systems, silvopasture systems, how to protect the trees and all that stuff. She's going to be joining us for that. So she's going to be leading her side of things. This will be a blended, lunch and learn instruction with some hands-on work. Nothing too crazy. We're gonna cut a little bit of stuff out. We're gonna plant some trees. So that's what that's coming on March 1st. So we'll have a busy weekend that weekend. We figure getting ready for people for one event, we might as well just do both back to back. I don't see why that wouldn't work. So thank you for dropping in, Digger, and Hippocrates Gardens here. Good to see you guys. Thanks for stopping by. Whenever you have a minute. So let me click over here to my notes. If I could figure out how to see both screens at the same time, that would be great. But I'll have to figure that out another time. So I'll just have to click back and forth so I can see your all's comments and stuff. So uh, I hope you guys love my title, Getting into the Weeds with Sheep. I have to admit, I'm not a dad, but I like a good pun. I like a good dad joke. And as it happens that, sheep they want the weeds. They'll eat the grasses. They don't mind the grasses, but they will go for many, many things before they go for the grasses, which is beneficial, as I have found beneficial for the overall, for what we already have available on the landscape and for the direction I want to go in. So, for those who don't know, I am the fourth generation on this land, originally purchased by my great grandfather in the 30s, and everything we do up here is showcasing regenerative techniques. So we're real big into doing things in a manner that is slow, deliberate, frugal, and always, we're closing the loop. We're closing the nutrient loop. We are, doing our very best not to inadvertently export water, soil, things of that nature. Um, and we will, we really pay attention to those techniques. I really need my computer to cooperate with me here. All right. Cool. So, when we got started out here in 2020, we just started with the typical, the gardens, the no-till gardens, the some chickens, some turkeys, and I knew I needed grazers, I needed ruminants up here, but I just didn't quite know how to go about it at the time. And as I've learned with patience and just kind of keeping my ear to the ground, I was able to link up with Marcy and be part of her Learn to Farm program. And so that allowed me to have this starter flock of sheep, allowed me to have a mentor so that I wasn't, 100% on my own doing all this. And it just turned out to be a very beneficial, mutually beneficial program. The property had been fallow for about 30 years. Prior to that, there had been some beef cattle, Angus, and not a lot. So nothing was ever really overgrazed that I recall. It was just, Dad kept some cows to help, with it was agricultural zoning, keeps the taxes more manageable and that sort of thing. But by the mid 90s, he had started his own business, and he really did not have time to manage the cows along with everything else. So the cows went away, and after that, the only maintenance that really happened was some bush hogging in certain areas, and areas that were steeper and less accessible just went completely fallow. And that has resulted in, at this point, early succession forest in a lot of areas. So I have land that needs to be reclaimed, and we're getting there, section by section. But when I brought these sheep in, I knew I needed an animal that wasn't going to be super picky. And sheep were the correct choice because they have such a broad palate. They're very adaptable, and they eat everything that grows around here. Very, very useful in that manner. With bringing the sheep on, I found, well, let me back up for just a second. I wanted smaller, manageable animals. I didn't want to go to cows. For one thing, I didn't think that we had the kind of species available to really keep a cow healthy, and we don't right now. We actually don't have a lot of actual grasses. We are much, much heavier in weeds and fords and thorny shrubs and things of that nature, and not so much the grasses that cattle kind of depend on. So, and I knew that I really didn't want to go to goats because I had heard all the stories of, having a very hard time keeping goats in the fence, getting them to respect fence and that sort of thing. And because there's practically no border fencing, no perimeter fencing left, I needed animals that were going to respect a portable electric fence, and these sheep do. So I started out with about 6, and added about another 6, if I recall correctly, and the donkey just a few weeks later. So the first batch came in August of 2023, and the second batch came in just a few weeks later, like towards the end of August. So we had some issues with that early on, which I'll get to later. But that's combining these flocks resulted in everybody being exposed to barber pole worm, despite the fact that the original flock had been quarantined. Apparently, it wasn't quite long enough. So these kind of things happen. I'll get into how we managed that, how we dealt with all of that. But I'll tell you guys, like when I that first night that we had that first batch of sheep, and we had them pretty close to the house, like I can look out my front window and see them. It was just, I had like the most deep sense of completion. I was like, yes, this is right. This is what we're supposed to be doing. This is what we need here. This is going to work. Just felt very good having grazers having ruminants back out here again. So kind of the first tactic I guess I want to go over is addressing some of these common misconceptions about using animals to regenerate your soil. And the key is really you let the animal do 99% of the work. Maybe we'll say 90% because obviously there is moving the fence. There is a time investment that I have. But in terms of purchasing things, purchasing inputs, seed, fertilizer, that's not a thing. I'm not really doing that. We are heavy on observation, interaction. I know you guys hear that from me quite a bit. We study the process and we make slow, small adjustments to how we're managing the animals. And the good news is when you do it this way, you're probably not going to make things any worse, especially if you were starting out on fallow land or marginal land that has been, perhaps it's an area that's been damaged or clear cut, and whatever has come in to cover the soil, whatever brambles and thorny things and mixed weeds and mullein and all that, burdock has shown up to try to heal the soil. You're not going to make it worse. So that's kind of, I hope people would take that and kind of step back and breathe a sigh of relief. It's like, if you bring the animals in and you keep them moving, you are already on the right track. So again, this is patience. Curiosity is a big part of this. Observation is a big part of this. I spend a lot of time questioning how the animal impact affects that landscape and whether that's beneficial or harmful. So when it comes to like terminology, I like to say that sustainable, which is a very common word in this field, but sustainable kind of to me means like less bad. Sustainable means we're just kind of achieving homeostasis. We're not really improving anything. That's why I like to use the term regenerative, because with regenerative techniques, we are allowing nature to fully express itself and, take that path towards abundance, which is the base setting of nature. And it's also important during this period, this early period, throughout, but early on, when you're very excited, but you also aren't real sure you know what you're doing, because I've been there, to be open-minded and to try to set aside your preconceived notions. How it should be. Let nature be your teacher. Just kind of ease off the gas and let nature show you the way. So I saw so much early improvement by just after one pass of the sheep being on a certain area of land. And I was able to also notice their bad habits, their good habits, and just their general behaviors. So, like Joel Salatin says, they eat dessert first. When I let them into a new paddock, they go for the tastiest, freshest, something containing usually like the highest sugars, the highest carb count. They look for that stuff first. And depending on the time of year, those are different things. But I found that it's often like blackberry leaf, especially young blackberry leaf, plantain, chickweed, the leaves off of privet and bush honeysuckle, and they will target all those things first, way before they go for the fescue and the Johnson grass. That's where having Primrose, our donkey, comes in, because Prim, she likes weeds too, but she also likes the grasses. So that kind of helps balance things out a little bit. They most definitely, they look for the tastiest thing first. So some early improvements that I noticed, there were several cedar trees where the soil underneath had been bare year round. Didn't matter what time it was. Year it was. Didn't matter how much rain we'd had. Always bare. And just after one pass of those animals being there, and they like to be anytime really, but especially in the summertime, they like to be under that cedar tree. So lots of manure gets deposited there, gets trampled into the ground, and within one season, that cedar now boasts like this big, thick mat of chickweed. such a big mat that I actually go over there now because it's just a short walk up the driveway, and that's one of the things that I've been feeding the rabbits this time of year. It's been there since it reemerged in late December. So I was even getting it when we had snow. I knocked the snow off and I was pulling out very tasty chickweed. Plantain was showing up anywhere that there had been like bare spots in the soil. Plantain, rabbit tobacco, and even I was seeing like a reemergence of cool season grasses, like fescues, and all of your kind of young forbs like henbit, dead nettle, um, speedwell, things of that nature start showing up. Anywhere where anything that's not going to need a very deep root, those are the first things that kind of come in on this particular site. This allowed me to kind of it was just like kind of a real quick reinforcement of, okay, I'm good. I'm doing the right thing. I'm not making it worse. We are seeing like a seed bank reemerge. We are seeing positive impact. And I also discovered, because I was moving them fairly slowly, if you move the animals slowly, in my opinion, I am more able to closely watch what they target early, what they target about halfway through the time that they're going to be in that paddock, and what they pretty much skip over or they only hit if they absolutely have to. So always the tender stuff first. Their secondary seems to be the grasses. And the very last things they will do is like they'll take the tops off of, we have a broom sedge out here, which is basically that bright yellow grass that you will see in pastures. It's bright yellow this time of year. When it's vegetative in midsummer, it has just a little bit of green in the top, and they will eat that kind of like consolation prize if they're not getting moved quickly enough. So speed of movement, it's variable, and there's really no, there's some rules and some guidelines, but you can really, it depends on how many animals, how much space you have, and also kind of depends on what you can manage yourself. So sometimes I would put them into a bigger paddock for more days if I was going to be too busy to move them more frequently. And then other times when like I knew like I had like a week where I was pretty much going to be home every single day, I would tighten them up. I would fence a big paddock, but I would put a divider fence in there and tighten them up. And then, we kind of call that mob grazing, and then move them, every couple of days. So, but one thing that I've had to take into account with the movement is, and the space I leave them, is that Primrose really hates to feel cramped. And if she feels cramped, she'll start chasing the sheep. She will get super restless. So, and now that we have so many, I think we're at 35 right now, somewhere around in there. They need more space. So this is kind of going to adjust how I move them once everything is vegetative again. The good news is that I have been working on clearing, and I have more space available to fence. Previous areas that I could not get a fence through, I'm starting to be able to get fence through. So that's going to help. But one of the, I'll come to that in a minute. But one of the things that I have noticed, if they are in too large of an area, or if they're in an area too long, they will back graze. And that means that if they've been in an area long enough to where a plant is beginning to regrow, as soon as that tiniest bit of new growth is in, they'll go back and they'll nip that again. And that can really stunt a plant. So to me, that is important to try to reduce that when things are vegetative. It'll stall out the root growth, and therefore you've got to slow down your whole process of building the soil. So in my opinion, it's better to leave more plant matter behind when you're early in this process. And then finally, you just kind of need to be patient, and you can wait for that seed bank to emerge. All soils have, or all native soils, have probably, hundreds of types of seeds available at any time, and they're just hanging out, dormant, awaiting the kind of conditions they need to emerge. So I am comfortable with taking all these other techniques with not really adding much seed to the mix. If I have seed available from something that's been left over, I may use it, but I'm not going out and I'm not buying hundreds or thousands of pounds of seed and broadcasting in huge areas. I'm letting the seeds in the soil reemerge as they have the conditions to do so. I kind of figure this is one of those things where nature knows better. Nature knows what's up, and I can just trust it and kind of just scratch that off of my to-do list altogether. As a part of kind of multifunctional grazing, function stacking, that sort of thing, sheep work really well as part of a bigger system, especially if you're going down the road of agroforestry, building tree hay, silvopasture, fodder trees, all that stuff. You can pair them with that very effectively. So you can, run them in an area that you eventually want to plant out to trees, not so much that you have no grass or ground cover anymore, but trees for shade, trees as shelter belts, trees as part of, hedgerows. And you can let their work improve the soil to the point where a tree will be happy. And then you just need to make sure that tree is protected in its early stages, because sheep, ruminants in general, will be very hard on any emerging shoots off of a tree. They will strip bark, they will girdle it, so you do have to be able to protect them. I have a fairly simple system because these sheep, because they respect this fence so well, fortunately, I will put a triangle of like 3 posts around a tree and run the string around. And as far as they know, that's hot and that will shock them. So I will do that, and I will do that to protect newly planted trees, and I've done it to protect just like specimen trees that were already in a pasture, like young trees. We've got a section below Tyler's house where he's planted out a lot of really nice trees, but if the sheep start wearing on them, or Prim likes to rub and push on trees, they could be harmed. So we protect them in that manner. And then there's, if you come to the agroforestry class, you will learn some all kinds of techniques for protecting trees when we're talking about hundreds of trees. I'm protecting, 6 or 7 trees at a time. It doesn't take me very long to set that up. But if we're doing dozens and dozens or hundreds of trees, we kind of need a system. We need to duplicate a system to keep them from being damaged. Let's talk about soil disturbance for a minute. So I'm sure you guys know that every time the soil is disturbed, whether it's by an animal, whether it's by humans, machinery, anything like that, nature quickly wants to heal it over. So we are actually experimenting with this pasture kind of close to the cabin, southwest facing pasture that has always been, or at least as long as we've been back here, pretty compacted and pretty, just not much in the way of topsoil. Very compacted, very rocky, and lots of bare spots. So this is the pasture that we have been rolling out hay quite a bit. This is where they've had their winter paddock, so there's a lot of manure on the ground. And here comes the rain. And I, with all the hay rolled out, what I believe we're going to do is rake the soil very lightly. I think we're going to take the bucket of of Tyler's Bobcat with the teeth, and we're going to back up and just drag those teeth just an inch or two, just enough to basically scuff up the soil. We're going to try to do it on contour as much as possible. That's going to help slow the water down as well, because it is on a hillside, and that's always part of the problem up here is grade. And that will work more of the biomass from all the leftover hay into the soil, and it will also hopefully wake up some seeds, some weed seeds. I am really looking forward to trying this. So this is kind of the thing where I'm thinking we probably can't make it worse. We just need to do this. We need to do this before everything warms up again, but we can't do it when we're super wet. So we're probably going to be in a little bit of a holding pattern with that. But this is not something that I would do over and over and over again. Just like it's not a big deal to like till a garden initially, to flip that sod over and then start amending it, and you just keep amending that soil once the sod is gone. Or I should say, the grasses are gone. But if we're, so it's like a one-time thing. And if it works in this particular area, we can do that in multiple other areas around the property. Because like I said, this whole pasture has always been super, super thin. A little bit of fescue comes up, a whole lot of blackberry, and the broom sedge comes up, and there's many places, just like dinner plate size places, of absolutely nothing growing whatsoever. So some of those places have healed, that got something coming in, but there's a lot of places that haven't. So that's where we're going to work with some disturbance and see how that works out. It is important to do this in such a way that it doesn't make the pasture like inaccessible, or we can't walk on. Like I wouldn't want to drag a subsoil or anything like that. We just literally want to rake that soil a little bit. So that's kind of my primary focus, is to rebuild the soil layer and keep enough land that has had enough disturbance that the weeds are still a thing, because that's really what those sheep want. If we get to the point where we're heavy on grasses, I will see if the sheep convert and want to eat those grasses. But if they don't, and they don't hold body condition, then maybe I need to consider another animal at that point. But I think I'm a few years away from even having to worry about that. So we'll address that when the time comes. And like I said, you can always include fodder trees, hybrid poplar, hybrid willow, mulberry, box elder, corkscrew willow. I count all of those. They're all good protein content, and they all grow really fast. They're all easy to propagate on a moderate scale, and that's kind of those are my go-to for adding to the pasture. I kind of cover this, but when we're doing winter management, I've kept them, like I said, I put them on the worst ground that I had. That was also draining, so we don't want to put them in anything that's going to hold a bunch of water and cause hoof issues. Rolling out hay, adding biomass, spreading the manure. So I've also trucked out like compost, my own finished compost. And I also bring them treats. So wherever we've been cutting out privet, we drag that privet in there for them to have, just kind of a little extra something to eat when they're mostly on hay. And then finally we're gonna finish all that up with some light machine disturbance. I mean, I could do it with probably a tiller too. Running a tiller sucks for me. It's very uncomfortable. So, I mean, I say doing it with a machine. It could be done by hand with, a broad fork. Even just lifting, not even flipping it over, but just like digging a broad fork, stepping back, and popping up that little bit of sod. And I may actually attempt that in a few areas. And another thing I can also go back and do anywhere that we have disturbed the soil is start dropping in, 2 or 3 inches down into the ground, root cuttings from comfrey. I would rather have comfrey in there, working on breaking up the soil, working on, the aeration, and kind of being that biodynamic accumulator. And of course, they love it. They can eat it. It's a wonderful forage for them. All right, let's cover some of the fencing details. So these sheep are fenced for the most part on 3-strand polywire. So it is a nylon string with metal filaments woven throughout. Um, Step in posts, and I use 3 reels. So I have 4. I have 4 reels. That's how, ended up being how many I needed to stay where I always had fence ready to go. And I'm not going to get super deep into the techniques of the fencing right now, although I am going to be having classes up here to show that for people to learn. But geared reels are a total game changer. Cannot describe enough. Like eventually, all my reels will be geared. 2 of my 4 are geared, and those will crank as fast as I can walk. I get 3 turns for every crank versus my black reels. It's 1 crank, 1 turn, and that can get a little tiring, especially for Mr. Carpal Tunnel over here. The sheep, but they have to be trained to the poly wire. I was lucky. These sheep came trained to the fence, and with very little exception, they have been very good about that. I keep the fence hot. I don't leave it off. I don't really give them an opportunity to check it out and be like, oh, this thing doesn't bite anymore, and start pushing under it. And the pushing under is the most common thing. It is normally when they really want to graze something fresh, and they will start sticking their head under. And because the pole of their head, their hair is so thick right there, they're often not getting a hit. So that's usually how that starts. And before you know it, they'll have their neck and then their shoulders, and they'll pop out the other side. So a sheep that does not respect the fence gets about 1 or 2 chances to learn to respect the fence. And then after that, they go to freezer camp. I've put 2 in freezer camp at this point for that very reason. But before I go to that particular tactic, I make sure my fence is live. So, I go back, I check all my components. I make sure I don't have a break in it. I make sure I'm not grounding out. We're so dry and rocky here sometimes that even just soaking the ground around the ground rod is a big help. So I'll go around with the tester, and there's a lot of, there's hours worth of teaching about electricity and electric fence, but those are kind of the big things. Is like, make sure your fence is actually good. Make sure you don't have a dead spot somewhere. The metal filaments will break. This stuff is basically disposable. It will wear out. You can get the poly rope, which is much thicker and heavier and will last longer, but the price point is quite a bit higher. So you can kind of determine, how much you can spend at a time. And you can always kind of go back and reacquaint them. So one thing that we will do here is we keep a plug-in. I think it's a 30 joule. I have to double check, but it's a hot box. And so if they are not obeying the fence with the solar charger, which is a much, lower setting, we'll hook them up to the powered box and let them reacquaint themselves with how the fence can bite if they make contact with it. Setting up your strands can vary. I tend to, right now, I do a very bottom strand. I skip 2 hooks, so I do a center strand, and then I do a top strand that's like 1 notch down from the very top. I could probably get down to 2 and not bother with that top strand, but I keep it because of Primrose. Although she is wonderful about obeying the fence. But that said, sometimes she gets excited and rowdy, and she kind of jumps and she kicks, and she gets kind of she gets the donkey zoomies. So I like having that top strand. And we're talking about, it takes me, for the average paddock that I build, an extra 5 minutes of walking around to set that top strand. So it's not really a big deal. A lot of people will get their sheep trained to 1 strand. And probably not when you have lambs, but when everybody's, tall, they've got them to 1 strand. And I think that's great. A lot of people train their cows to 1 strand. I don't know if I'll get to that point. I might feel better about it if we have perimeter fencing, but I really don't need my sheep to be like down here at the apartments or in the neighborhood to the west of us. So, and I'm seeing your all's comments, and I will come back and I will hit all those once I kind of run through my stuff. And I hope with the rain being here, I hope you guys can still hear me okay, because it's getting loud and I feel like I'm starting to yell to hear myself. Um, so um, now let's kind of talk about where we're back to grazing techniques, particularly with training or grazing for long-term productivity. The rule that I have been following and plan to follow into the coming season is the rule of thirds. I use the rule of thirds to know when it's about time to move the sheep. So regardless of the size of the paddock they're in, when that paddock looks like it's about 1/3 has been grazed, about another third has manure on it, and 1/3 looks kind of trampled, I need to be preparing to move them within a day or so when I see that. Otherwise, that's when we can have behaviors like back grazing. We can have behaviors like they're grazing too close to manure, which can become a parasite issue. And they really don't like to graze where they've been walking, or where, if it's something that's fairly tall where they've made their little trails, they don't like to graze there. So if it's trampled, that's not really grazable space to them. If forced, they'll do it, but again, that's, we're working outside of the animal's nature there, so we try not to go down that road. And then also kind of our return time, so the times that we return to a paddock that we've been in within a season. Most of the parasites in our region with our weather have about an 18-day lifespan. So if a parasite comes out in the animal's poop, it is viable on average about 18 days. And they can be, I can say it, not viable, but it can move to a point where if it's ingested, it can cause issue with the animal. So we definitely don't want to stay in an area beyond that point in the warm weather season. We don't have to worry about this so much in the wintertime because those parasites are dormant. The cold weather kind of keeps them to where they're not an issue. Some stuff you need to wait up to 6 months. When we had a parasite outbreak here, so we combined those two flocks early on. We were under the impression, we started seeing animals go down. We were very, very hot, like 100-degree, heat index hot. They were going through a lot of water, and we started seeing animals go down. We sent one off for autopsy at UT Vet School, and after we kind of knew, like based on what was going on, that we had barber pole worm, which results in basically anemia. They basically bleed out. We knew that was the issue, but it took months to actually get the confirmation from the vet school because they were so backed up. So the area where we had the outbreak, I was able to keep them off of that for 6 months. And the following year, we did not have a recurrence. We did medicate one time, but 3 animals we were unable to catch and unable to medicate, and they've all survived. And they've all continued to thrive and do well. So we already had a little bit of resistance. So basically what happened was the animals that had no resistance died. I believe there were 5 animals that died. And the ones that had the resistance are still doing great. So hopefully we've kind of won that battle. But that is something that we have to watch for. And it's just one more reason why to keep moving your animals. If you are finding yourself constantly battling parasites, all kinds of issues, I think that's one of the first things you should do is to try to get them onto fresh land as soon as you can. I apply a lot of free and cheap solutions. So I make compost tea we're talking about, working on the soil, getting more vegetation coming in, more forbs, more forage for the animals. I make compost tea, worm compost tea for my worm system. And if you have the equipment for it, you can make a compost extract. I apply that hay, the comfrey cuttings, biomass in any form, even light applications of wood chips. And if you feel that light earthworks are necessary to slow down the water and get more water into the soil so that vegetation has what it needs to survive, that goes a long way. I say light earthworks because you don't want to be putting in expansive swale systems that make it difficult for you to move across the land and to move the animals across the land. I've thrown down rabbit manure, old straw, grass cuttings, finished, composted wood chips, composted leaves, all that stuff. Anything you would do to build your garden soil, you can do it in your pasture too. It gets you there the same way. I think I've covered most of the challenges. So I covered the barber pole, fence jumpers or pushing under the fence, the parasite management. One thing I haven't covered yet, and I haven't discussed it at length because it was such a strange and bizarre instance that I still don't really understand. But when Primrose the donkey came to us, we were under the impression that she was bred, and that ended up being true. And but she had very poor body condition. I don't really know anything. We weren't. I didn't deal with the people that Primrose came from, but she had very poor body condition. She was underweight. Her ribs were showing. Marcy kept her for a while to kind of quarantine her, and got her on hay, got her on fresh food, and basically got where we had good interaction. She wasn't fearful, and then she brought her out here. And since that time, Prim has done wonderfully. She's put on weight. She's maintained a weight. But in early spring of last year, she had a stillborn foal. And as best as we could determine, there was either some kind of genetic issue because it was born still in the amniotic sac, which, as I understand it, is pretty rare. And like I said, it was stillborn. And so we suspect a genetic issue. It could have been that she had a stressful pregnancy from like early on. She could have been carrying that foal for a while and it wasn't alive. And that was one of those things where we weren't going to spend a bunch of money to try to really figure out what happened. It just didn't make sense. She's a guardian donkey. She's not for show or anything like that. But we did have that instance. So at some point we do need to, now that she's healthy again, it makes sense to try to breed her and try again. But she really didn't have any physical issues after that. We watched her for like signs of mastitis or anything like that, but she never even had any milk come in. So I kind of think her body knew for a while that foal wasn't viable. And the hormones did not even kick in to produce milk. So that was really sad. That was a very tough day. But hopefully we'll be able to try again. And now that she's healthy and has maintained a good body weight and everything, and she doesn't seem to be stressed at all, we can try again. One other thing that these sheep will do that I have noticed, which is very aggravating, they will dig at bare ground. They like to dig themselves, just like a dog. They like to dig themselves a nice, cool spot to lay down. So I've had to make little dead fences to keep them off of bare spots. If there's a spot that's, 2 or 3 dinner plates, they'll dig at that. They'll make it wider to sit in. So I have to protect that, or I have to like throw a bunch of material on it. So sometimes I'll throw wood chips or leaves on it, and then they'll just lay on that, and they won't dig it up. But, just kind of like a dog digging holes in your yard, it kind of goes against what we're trying to do. So I have to kind of manage that set of behavior. Let's see what we got here. Lambing season. So we're in the middle of our second lambing season. Once we get in, so we keep the ram in with them all the time. I like to have that additional kind of protection. And because these ewes have been lambing in winter their entire lives, and hay here is accessible and inexpensive, and it makes sense to use hay to improve pastures, and everybody has good body condition, I'm okay with lambing in wintertime. I may adjust that at some point, but for now, I'm kind of sticking with what works. And once we are in wintertime, we are kind of bedded down into a winter paddock. With adjacent space available to shift in so that they're not, around, too much poop. We don't want them covered in poop or anything, of course. So we do have the option to move them to dry ground, which we have done. But it was just a lateral move. So once it's lambing season, These guys they lamb in the field. We don't even have a barn to put them in. We built a shelter. We built like kind of like a little event tent, extra shelter that Tyler had laying around. They hardly used it. They got in there one day when it was kind of like spitting ice and rain, but they spend 99% of their time just out. If they can get out of the wind under a tree, that's all they really care about. They're very adapted to pasture lambing. We don't interfere with anything other than to get in there, and we like to see what the sex of the lamb is, just for our own note taking, and then that's it. We do not do any kind of intensive lambing, and so far, everybody who has lamb, so both the adult ewes and the yearling ewes, nobody's been rejected. Everybody has, everybody's got good mothering instincts. Everybody's got good milk production. Everybody's got good body condition. So if I run into an issue where that is not the case, like we did recently have a case of a stillbirth. So number 23 had a stillbirth. She had a live birth last year, so I'm not necessarily going to eliminate that sheep just for that reason. But if we see, like poor body condition coming on, and it's not because of a mismanagement issue, if it's a genetic issue, then, we will call out undesirable genetics and encourage the stronger genetics. Again, taking nature's example. So we don't baby things. I'm not doing bottle lambs. Not going to do it. I know how that sounds. And if I have one born tomorrow that, is rejected or doesn't nurse, I will get on my network and I'll say, hey, does somebody want a bottle lamb? But I'm not doing it. I don't have time. It's not feasible. Some people will do it, especially if it is a ram lamb that they're just going to raise for meat. If you have a very, very small flock and it really matters to you that you keep as many animals as possible, I get it. And you guys got to remember, I'm in a position where I did not buy these animals. All I have invested, I have money in hay and some equipment and stuff, but I didn't buy these animals. This is part of basically a leasing program where I get to keep half of the offspring after a 3-year term. So it's easier for me. Like, I wasn't happy when all those ones died from barber pole, but I mean, it sucked. Don't get me wrong. It's terrible. I was dragging dead sheep down into the woods. It was awful, but it's because I don't have all that monetary investment. I'm okay with okay, if this animal doesn't survive, it's all right because I'm improving my genetics throughout. It's a hard call to make, and I'm not going to come down on anybody who makes a different call than I do. It's a personal decision. Let's see. A lot of people ask me about poisonous plants. Short answer is, as long as these sheep have other options for things to eat, they don't eat too much of something that makes them sick. They're smart. They know. I think humans are the only creatures that willingly poison ourselves. So sheep they have very wise foraging instincts. So only if they were in an area where the only forage available to them was toxic, and they feel forced to eat it. So I just make sure that doesn't happen. That's a management call on my part. We do have like cherry trees, a lot of your prunus varieties, if they are wilted, like the fresh leaf usually isn't harmful, but wilted leaf apparently can contain enough cyanide to make an animal very sick or kill it. Same with elderberry. So I don't have them anywhere where they would have access to elderberry. I keep all that in a food forest. But there is cherry in some of these perimeters. And that's just, again, it's a management thing where I'm like, okay, if I feel like this tree is in danger of getting snapped off, and these are small trees, but if it's going to get snapped off and there's going to be wilted forage or wilted leaves down in there where they can access them, then I'll either fence them where they can't get to it, or I'll just take the steps to make sure that's not going to happen. All right, so I'm kind of, I'm kind of getting to my wrap up here, and my timing is pretty good. I'm right at about an hour, so I've been a little chatty. So I think I'm going to be able to pull this off, guys, for my presentation in a few days. Mindset and takeaways. Mindset's real big here. You are a steward of the land. Cultivate positive intentions. Think about it as a partnership. If you are a control freak, this actually may not work all that well for you. Some people who are control freaks benefit from this because if they want to do management intensive grazing, those things fit together for them. I am not a control freak. I am very much I like to stand back and observe what the impacts have been and adjust from there and adjust slowly. Let go of value judgments regarding plants and trust that animal has reasons for its behavior. This thing's been around a long time and they have all this, kind of natural genetic programming. And all we have to do is understand that and kind of leverage that in a way that benefits the property that you're working with. So curiosity, wonder, appreciation, always be observing, always be questioning, and slow, small adjustments to your methodology, I feel, is really key. We're playing the long game. It's about building a system. It's not just about managing the animals. It's about working with the animals to recreate a balanced system, but it's a multi-year process. But what is really encouraging and keeps me in the game is how quickly nature shows the benefits of the actions that you've been taking. Cool. Let me check your all's questions. All right. Digger's here. Hippocrates swung by. Mary is here. Good to see you, Mary. Pip and Eyes. Good evening, sir. Escape the city. Cool. All right. Let me catch up what you have shared with us here. All for native warm season forages, but there are benefits to high production forages as well. It depends on how much land someone is working with. Yeah, and I didn't actually mention how much land. So what we have available to us to graze is about 8 or 9 acres. There is more land that is completely covered up in calorie pear, privet, some deciduous trees that are worth keeping, and I have my work cut out for me getting that land accessible again. So yeah, that's one of those things. Like that area, I want to see more diversity of forages for sure. We have a lot of cool season stuff here. Warm season stuff, not so great. So there's work to be done there, and that's one of the reasons why I want the trees and the fodder trees, because I think that'll help fill in that gap while the warm season stuff is getting established. They scratch the surface with a cultivator to plant grass and Red River crabgrass. And okay, cool. So I don't know like all the varieties of crabgrasses. We've got some kind of crabgrass here. So that's awesome. So again, yeah, disturbance, a little bit of disturbance can really help you take care of business. All right. Do you have any resources on growing grass on steep grade land? I've got about 2 acres of heavily wooded slope that I'd like eventually to make into either silvopasture, and there's lots of small trees I can take out. So this actually sounds very similar to the area I was just describing. It is relatively steep, and one of the reasons why it's grown up is because it's pretty sketchy on a tractor, which is why Dad stopped bush hogging it once the cows were gone. I would see first, if you can roll hay on it, that would probably be the easiest and the least expensive. I would try to roll hay on it once you have the space to maneuver the hay. So my mentor, Marcy, a bunch of their land is steep, and they actually, so I roll the hay on contour because where I'm working is relatively, there's slope, but it's manageable. You can drive a tractor on it and not feel sketched out. But they roll perpendicular, which if you have to, you have to. So they, they start to unspool the bale and they just let it go down the hill. And then I think they have enough, they kind of figured out like how long a bale is, and they have enough hills so what you don't have like a big clump of hay at the very bottom, like it all rolls out. So that could be an option if it's super steep and you have enough room. You can roll perpendicular, and then you're still getting that biomass down. And then, yeah, look up. I don't know where you're at, but look up Wynn Miller, WYN Miller. She's got several presentations on YouTube, and she gets into her silvopasture system, how she protects the trees. And if you're anywhere near Knoxville, consider the class. Or she does tours out at their family farm. They've got a Century Family Farm in Newmarket, Tennessee, which is east of Knoxville. But yeah, her material is really good. She's my mentor when it comes to silvopasture. My sheep, yeah, they love tulip poplar. And I've got some that I've coppiced back for that very reason. Great trees, and box elder too. I mean, they grow really fast around here. They'll come up like a shrub. And just a few days ago, I took a bunch of cuttings off of one that was coming up like a shrub. So nothing was like bigger than maybe 2 inches diameter. And I cut it way back so that when it leaves out again, they can, just graze it. They can just reach it, because it was about, 12 feet tall. And then I've started, cuttings. So I can just kind of plug these cuttings, cheap, easy, start plugging them into various areas as well. And with the intention of not really, box elder, when they get real big, are very weak trees. The branches snap off. They can cause a lot of issue. But I just feel like they're such a great fodder tree and just so easy to propagate. Greg Judy has never answered this question for me, but I'm wondering how many lamb losses he has. Yeah, I'd like to know that too. I watch a lot of his stuff. Yeah, I just don't know. So, and I know like he's leasing so much land. He's got so many people helping him, such a big operation. Just in my early lessons here that I've been, taking all these notes and really trying to share this stuff. It's one of the reasons why I'm sharing this at this stage, because I love that these guys have been doing this for a long time, and they're super helpful and they're super knowledgeable, but it's like they don't always share what it was like when they first started. So, yeah, I know people are like, I'm not gonna, baby this lamb or whatever. And I know, like, because I'm a compassionate person and I'm kind of a big baby in a lot of ways when it comes to animals. I was one of those kids. I was always rescuing, baby birds and shit. If I had an abandoned lamb, I would try to find somebody to take it. Excuse me. I would try to find somebody to take it, because I just can't manage it myself. We have a 10-year-old on the property. The daughter of my brother's girlfriend. It could become Peyton's problem, if we had to have a bottle lamb or something like that. Because it's just not practical for me. And when we're talking about, you get into dozens and then hundreds of animals, it's just not practical. So, and I would probably only consider it if it was something that was being raised for meat. I know how it sounds like if it was a ewe lamb, but it's like, this thing is already weak. If I encourage weakness and I've made another generation off of that, you guys see where I'm going. So it's not that the decisions are easy, but I'm trying to be realistic with all this. Yeah, as far as I know, box elder is not toxic. They eat it here. And my friend Nicole, who has St. Croix sheep in Middle Tennessee, they're on a lot of creekside land. So there's box elder everywhere out there, big, like mature box elder. And they pollard it, a lot of it down, or kind of across, not as low as a coppice, but kind of like a low pollard. So it would flush out, and those sheep ate it with no issue. And like I said, I've watched I have these kind of 2 shrub sized box elders in a paddock down the driveway a little ways. And when that stuff was leafed out, they were actually grabbing, because like I said, it wasn't a full size tree. It was like springy branches. So they were actually grabbing a branch with their mouth and like grabbing it towards the base, walking it down and bending it over, and then stripping the leaves off. And I think they noticed it because Prim was rubbing on it. This is where it's like, as much as you can, if you can hang out with your animals, it's so cool what they teach you. Prim was rubbing on it and kind of pushing the branches down. Cause like I said, a lot of it was out of their reach. And like, somebody got a taste and it was on like Donkey Kong. So, so yeah, it's an appropriate tree. I don't know if people value it because, I mean, they're in the maple family, so they're, I think I think they can become problem trees. They're known as problem trees, like next to structures and things, because when they're really mature and then they start to die off, and you've got giant sections of box elder, stripping off of a massive tree. So yeah, so Escape the City, thank you for stopping in. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think that's what I got for you guys tonight. I filled in an hour, so I think it's going to work. Wish me luck. We'll be talking in front of one of the bigger groups. One of the bigger groups I've done at a conference that's full of kind of industry people. So I'm, I'm just a guy farting around up here on family land, trying to figure out what works and having a good time with it and sharing what I'm learning. So I'll let you guys know how it goes. I'm going to be out there Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. It's going to be in Franklin, Tennessee, the Pick Tennessee Conference. So you guys holler back at me if I can help you with anything. As always, doing regenerative homestead design, consulting, and education. And we will strongrootsresources@gmail.com if you need to holler at me. And you guys have a great evening. We'll talk to you next time.